Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux and Mike Beer here with the Daily Racing Form. We're going to take a look at a special pick 5 this Saturday out at Saratoga. It kicks off in race number 8. They're calling it the Mandatory Pay Pick 5, Mike, and it gets kicked off here in the Grade 1 Woody Stevens. And just overall thoughts on the sequence. I always ask you this question. Did you feel like it was a tricky one to navigate through?
Not necessarily. I felt, tell me if you agree with this, I feel like it's sort of spread early and then narrowed down late in the sequence. What about you?
I kind of decided to just spread in the turf races. That's usually my MO, and that's what I did here. But I agree. I did think that the first two were probably tricky legs to navigate through. And for me, I thought the Belmont was where I was actually going to lighten up the most.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I think we probably, it sounds like we're going to disagree on the Manhattan a little bit. I went really narrow there. You're going to, I guess, use a couple of extra ones. But in this first leg, the turf sprint, I was, or the Woody Stevens rather, I was just going to use, a few different horses because I didn't really trust anybody in this race.
Yeah, and you can see here on the morning line, it's a little bit all over the place. There's Prince of Monaco in here for Bob Baffert, Bookham Dano. And that's where I wanted to start here, though, was with the number 1, Bookham Dano, who obviously we haven't seen since February. But as we take a look at that replay last out, I thought this was a huge effort. Obviously, it flatters him in the sense that he misses by a head here, Mike, but who beats him? Forever Young, who certainly didn't disappoint us when he came over for the Kentucky Derby. And I just thought, at least in the stretch here, he battled it out. He had to ship, he had to stretch out in distance. And for a horse like him, I don't think cutting back to 7/8 is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, it feels like the cutback probably is good for this horse. And this is, yeah, you're right. This is a really strong performance here when you realize who he gets nailed by at the wire. Still, I don't feel like that was as good as Forever Young is. I don't think that was his best performance. So I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with Bookham Dano here. I have him on my ticket. I'll use him for sure. I thought this could be a pretty tough race for this horse, though. If nothing else, even with that most recent start that we just watched, I think he still has a little something to prove.
You can see it 7-2 on the morning line. I mentioned the name earlier, Prince of Monaco. This one for Bob Baffert, Flavien Prat in the irons. Obviously, he's been aboard for those last 3, Mike. I think for him, yes, it's been a little bit of a layoff, but we know the barn does fairly well with the long layoff types. And you have to think what he showed at Del Mar and the Del Mar Futurity 7/8. He could be very, very live here, especially with that early foot that he's shown.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to use this horse. He's another one that I can't say that I fully trust him, but I do think he's good. I do think he's a sprinter. He's working up a storm for his return here, and I think it's probably a good show of confidence that Baffert's going to ship him over for this race. I mean, I'm definitely using him. I'm definitely using the horse down on the rail, and then I'm just going to kind of just throw a couple of other horses in here, actually, because I just don't love anybody in this race.
All right, we'll move on to race number 9 here in the sequence. And as we look at this field, a little bit of difference here in this turf sprint when we're talking about the 5.5 furlong Jaipur here, Grade 1 event. I feel like this was wide open. Now, mind you, we're showing you the slate of 16 here, but just 12 in the main body. The rest are the also eligibles. Did you have a strong feeling on this event?
Not really. I'm just gonna make 2 comments on, and then I want you to do the rest of the handicapping for this race and tell people what you think. Cogburn is the morning line favorite. He's the horse to beat in here, and maybe he's just better than these horses. I'm not totally sold on this horse, and so I didn't really want to just lean on him in here and just sort of hand the race over to him. Maybe he just wins, and that's fine. I'll use him, but I wanted to use several other horses in this race. What was your take?
I love Cogburn in the spot. I mean, but a 2-1, I don't necessarily love the price on him, and I think it's a big field. I think the big thing with him, he's shown that versatility where he can be further back and make a late run, or he can be a little bit closer to it, and that's what we saw last time out at Churchill Downs in the Grade 2 turf sprint. But a couple of others I wanted to point out. We'll take a look at a replay here for Arzak in the win here in the Shakertown at Keeneland. I thought this was a very good effort, and I think for him, the difference was in terms of position, he was a little bit closer early on, and he makes that late move here. He gets up over Mischief Magic, who's another horse I think is live in this spot as well. And I thought there was some intrigue at a horse that might offer some value in here, and you can see the late move from that runner. But to me, I think if you like one of them in a race like this, you probably like both of them.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very good way to look at it. And I will use both of them. I kind of prefer Mischief Magic. I'm glad that you brought him up. If nothing else, you're going to get a price on that horse this time. He's been the favorite in his last 2 starts. He will not be the favorite in here. I'm definitely going to use him. I will use Arzak just because he's so logical in this race.
Yeah, and then you can see that Appleby has a couple of runners in here. I think the other replay I wanted to focus in on, though, just because so many horses exit this race, is the elusive quality at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet back on May 4th. You can see Dancing Buck was able to take them on the front end, and thinking that was at 6 furlongs, 5.5 should help him. But I think the big thing with Dancing Buck specifically, he's going to have some company on the front end. And you can see behind him, the second and third place finishers also are entered in this spot as well. I think he did everything right here, but my big question, I go back to it, Mike, is if he has some pressure, can he do the same thing?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. He did have all the best of it in that race right there, getting loose on the lead when the other speed missed the break. But I never looked at him as a horse who needs the lead to be effective. I feel like if he's denied the front in this race, I think it's okay with Dancing Buck. I think he can win without making the lead in here. He's a very interesting horse, and he should be a fair price.
All right, we'll move on to the third leg of the sequence, another grade one event. Gotta love 5 grade ones here in this sequence. Race number 10, the grade one Metropolitan Handicap. Now, this is going to be the shortest field that we're going to see here, but the talent's certainly there. We see National Treasure, we see White Abarrio, and we also see Post Time. And I'm actually going to start just with one replay here for this race, Mike, and it's going to be Post Time. And I want to get your thoughts on this performance. So he gets defeated, right? That win streak goes out the window, and Messier ends up being the winner. I just thought the trip, he was stretching out to a mile, and I think he was further back early on than he prefers to be.
Yeah, you can say, go ahead and say it. Sheldon Russell got this horse beat in this race. He had him too far away. He mistimed his run, and Post Time's going to come up a little short. He ran great in this race. He ran great 2 starts back, overcoming a slow pace in the Carter. And he's got 2 figures prior to that against weaker horses, sure, but 2 figures that make him a real contender in this race. I'm using this horse.
Yeah, I'm using him too. And then I struggled in terms of ticket structure of using 3 horses in here. I think on paper, everyone can see the 2, 3, and the 6. They are the main logical contenders. And I personally couldn't use all 3 of them and had to make a call. And I just wanted to get your overall thoughts on the 2 horses at the lower prices on the morning line, that being the 2 National Treasure and the 6 White Abarrio.
Well, yeah, it's a good point that you bring up. Maybe it's a mistake to use both of them in here. Maybe you're just supposed to separate them and pick the one you prefer. I do have them both on my ticket only because I'm using prices in the first 2 legs, and then I'm using the horse who's not going to be anywhere near the favorite in the Manhattan. So I have them both on there. To be honest, if I was cutting one and I really did, it was a last minute decision to add White Abarrio on there, I just wouldn't use him. I mean, he can win. He's the horse to beat in here. To me, he's overrated since Dutrow took over. I know he's got all the credentials. I think he's just a little overrated, and that means he's probably going to get overbet in this race.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you bring this up. It is no shock. I'm not a big fan of National Treasure. There's just something about him. I haven't been able to jump on the bandwagon, and the contrast. I've always loved White Abarrio and liked getting to watch him as a 3-year-old down in South Florida. But I just felt like if I went on credentials as of the last 7 months, even with the Breeders' Cup win with White Abarrio, I think seeing such a dull performance in the Saudi Cup, I had to use National Treasure, and I decided to toss White Abarrio. So I know you used them both, but he was the one that you thought about tossing. I just wondered with National Treasure, especially, focusing on him at the mile distance. I think he has a very live shot here. A 1.1 miles is maybe where I start to question him, as he almost got caught in the Pegasus World Cup, but at a mile, I just think he's too good not to use.
Yeah, I agree with that. The mile could be an advantage for him, especially with his speed. I mean, Pratt just really can't fool around here from the gate. He's got to send this horse and make the lead with him, and then make White Abarrio run him down.
All right, we'll move on to the 4th leg of the sequence. Race number 11, the grade 1 Manhattan. Look at this field. It's a very nice field, I thought, top to bottom, with a lot of different runners in here. And I'm going to leave it to you because you already made kind of the disclaimer. You went pretty light here.
Yeah, I'm only going to use the 6 in this race. Al Rifa shipping over. This horse has really strong credentials over in Europe, and he's second off the layoff now. He just ran in a really strong race over there, a Group 1 race, and he was right there at the wire. His overall form's really good. Obviously, there are some issues with this horse as a 3-year-old with only 2 starts, but he ran well in both of those races too. He was a really good 2-year-old. I just think he's probably even better than he looks on paper. I don't think there's anybody in this field to necessarily be afraid of, and he's going to be a fair price in this race. He's the only horse I'm using in here.
So I use him and I spread here, and maybe I go against kind of the logic that I explained in race 10 of maybe not using a bunch of horses at lower prices, but I found it tough to really pick between the 5, 7, and the 9. I think on paper, I'd probably pick Program Trading out of those 3 if I only could pick one. Obviously, this is a horse that doesn't matter how much time he has off in between his races. He came back, I thought, in a really big way last time out in that grade 1 event at Churchill, and I think he can take another step forward. So I understand why he's 5-2 on the morning line, but I go back to Nation's Pride and I look at his performance last time out, and I just wonder if he can take another, step forward, if he can kind of rekindle the form that we saw in the past when he was in North America and ran here. And then there's also on the outside, the number 9 Measured Time is another horse. We don't know what he can do here, but obviously William Buick's booked to ride this one, and Dettori stays with Nation's Pride. He was aboard for that last start. So I didn't want to get into the politics of really trying to figure out who was better. I think there's cases to be made for all of them. So I did spread here, actually used the 5, 6, 7, and 9. But I like what you said about the 6 in here. I think you're going to get the value. I love that Johnny V is aboard this one. And despite having a limited start last year in terms of races, I think the price will be right on that runner. We can move to the final leg of the sequence. The reason that we are focusing in on this card at Saratoga, the Belmont Stakes. Big thing to mention, Mike, not a 1.5 miles. It's a 1.25 miles. Once again, a field of 10. And overall thoughts on the field?
I don't know. Listen, to me, these 3-year-olds just aren't very good. I think Sierra Leone's the best one. And I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of his race to lose here. Mind Frame is the wild card. Maybe he's this good, and the only 2 starts and stepping up in class and stretching out and all that stuff won't bother him at all. I don't really want to use him, but I won't be surprised when he runs well. I kind of just felt like it's his race to lose, and if he gets a good trip, I just think he'll beat these horses. The only other horse I picked Resilience in the Derby. I bet him in the Derby. I almost went back to him again in here, and I couldn't talk myself into it, but I will use him in the pick 5.
And a comment on Sierra Leone, I think some people always have that mind frame or mindset with him that he's got too much work to do late, right? And that's kind of what happened, they say, in the Derby once again. I don't know. I think it was just a different sort of circumstance. He only has 9 other rivals in here. I think getting the trip that he needs will be a lot easier. And I still think you can't take anything away from his Derby performance. So I agree. I think he is the horse to beat. Mind Frame is maybe a little bit of a wild card. Just those 2 starts coming into this. He's been very good in both of them, but I didn't want to use him on my ticket. We kind of went in a similar direction here. I like Resilience as well, but we should kick it off here though with a replay, Mike, as we look at the Preakness just a couple of weeks ago out at Pimlico. And Seize the Gray gets it done on the front end, and Mystic Dan, he tried everything that he could. He just comes up second best in this group. Takeaway and thoughts. I know you're not going to use either of these horses, but what do you think about them now going back to 1.25 miles just a couple of weeks later?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to knock either one of them. I mean, Mystic Dan, I guess he ran fine in here. His Derby was obviously good, and he runs okay in here. I just didn't really see an excuse. And, the more I looked at the race, the more I was disappointed that he was beaten kind of so easily by Seize the Gray. And I realized that Seize the Gray was maybe underrated on the way in, and he had a great trip in there, loose on the lead. But I was disappointed in Mystic Dan. There's no way I'm betting Seize the Gray back in this race in the Belmont. And there was really nobody else that sort of caught my attention.
Yeah, I think the thing with Seize the Gray, I mean, obviously he was very impressive in the Preakness, but we've seen this time and time again in the Preakness. If you can kind of get an easy lead and you're not pressured, we've seen it with him. We've seen it with National Treasure. That's kind of what happens. And I just think there might be more pressure in this race early on than he had to face at Pimlico. So I couldn't use him. Mystic Dan would have been my 3rd pick. He's not going to make my ticket, but we're in the same band camp here, I guess, in the sense that I use Sierra Leone and Resilience. And I just did want to show his performance 2 back. He ends up being 6th in the Derby, and I thought it was an okay performance all in all, having that thrown at him after just, having a couple of starts in 2024 under his belt. And I thought his performance in the Wood Memorial was very, very strong. And I'm just wondering, in this race, he draws again more towards the inside. Can he get a trip where he's able to kind of tuck in, save some ground, and make one move and be at least close to it early on?
Yeah, and and maybe that was ultimately what did him in the Derby, at least a little bit. I mean, because it kind of felt like when you watch it back that the 1.25 miles was too much for this horse, but he was pretty wide all the way around the track in there, and that won't be the case here. He gets to save a little more ground. Maybe he's got a little bit more left at the end.
All right, that was the final leg in this mandatory pay pick 5. We'll take a look at our tickets here. Just a $64 ticket for me, Mike. I think we agree that race 9, the Jaipur, is pretty wide open. There's different directions to go. I went a little bit skinnier in the first leg. I used Bookham Dano and the 7 Prince of Monaco. I couldn't see outside of those 2. I mentioned spread in the Jaipur. I did throw out White Barrio, though, in race number 10. So I just used National Treasure and Post Time. I spread once again in the Manhattan. I just could not get a strong pulse on it, though. I do love program trading, but did like the other runners there towards his outside. And then just 2 deep in the Belmont using Resilience in Sierra Leone. So as I mentioned, $64 for me. We'll take a look at your ticket next. And Similar. I mean, it's a $72 ticket overall, but the big difference between our tickets, you have a single.
Yeah, I'm going to single that horse in the Manhattan, El Rifa, and just take my chances with him. I just think it's a good spot for him. We have the same idea in the Belmont Stakes, so hopefully we're right there. And again, I just sort of did a little spreading early on in this race. I don't have a good opinion or a strong opinion in the Woody Stevens, so I just threw a few different horses in there. I put the 12 in there, horse we didn't talk about, BU. Just he's going to be a big price in here, and maybe he's just a sprinter, Ashley. I don't know. His race 2 back, I think, gives him some kind of a chance in here. And then I just threw in a bunch of horses in the turf sprint because I don't trust the favorite. He's the most likely winner, but I don't trust him. And I just wanted to throw in some other horses in there, including the horse on the rail, Thin White Duke, he shows up every single time. He's going to be a huge price in here, and I don't think he's overmatched.
Yeah, definitely got some prices in those opening couple legs of the sequence. So $72 for Mike, $64 for me. Don't forget, 14 races at Saratoga this Saturday. This pick 5 that we focused in on starts off in race number 8, the Woody Stevens, all grade 1 events. It's a great betting card, Mike. So I know if I get knocked out early in this ticket, I'll definitely be firing on those last couple races.
Yeah, you can always just reload and go right back in.
All right, everyone. Best of luck this Saturday.